Okay, go ahead, Ben.
Okay.
We're going to talk about grocery shopping.
Yeah. Well, going to Ross is where we went, especially when we were pretty young, and my mom would buy most of her groceries there, and she would probably have to wait till the weekend when she had a car to use. But at the front of the store, and that's where it's the southwest corner of 62nd Maple, they had a candy area at the front of the store to the right. As you walked into the store, to the right of the door was a candy counter, and it had just oodles of candy for a penny or a nickel, that you could buy all different kinds. They had the little wax pop bottles with colored sweetened water inside, and they would have these hard white candy cigarettes in looked like a cigarette box, and they'd have bubble gum, cigars, and
The sheets of the dots.
oh, dots. Yeah, they
Yeah.
still sell that dot candy, but
Yeah.
it's like little hard frosting or something in dots. You could buy that, and then pixie sticks, of course, and Boston baked beans and gum, and you could always, almost all the stores in Benson would have a gumball machine, and you could get 2 pieces of gum for a penny. And I think even the banks had them, and Jawbreakers, and there's
But I
some
also
candy
remember.
that's not sold anymore today.
Yeah, that's for sure. But I remember you would go, the store wasn't very big. And so your choices weren't huge like you have now. And to the left when you went in would be the meat. And I remember their meat counter and going back and choosing the meat, and then the canned goods would be more in the center, and cereal.
And you didn't buy meat prepackaged. The butcher packaged it for you.
Yeah.
And then
I
the
s-
produce was on the west wall of the store,
Mhm.
and a lot of canned food, and it was very crowded in there. They didn't have a lot of frozen food because TV
Yeah.
dinners were pretty new at that time, and they had very little frozen food. We didn't really buy frozen vegetables and stuff until a little later, maybe into the 60s.
And one thing that probably was a little bit different for our family is my dad would go to Sorensen farm to buy our milk. And he
Dairy
would-
farm.
Dairy farm,
And other
Which
dairy
is-
farms.
yeah, which is at where Emmanuel Hospital is now. He worked at that farm when he was growing up in his high school years. He'd worked there in the summer. And he believed that we shouldn't pasteurize the milk. So he would go out and get unpasteurized milk. And I remember the cream being at the top, and that was what we had on our cereal. So that is a weakness of mine.
Yeah,
To
mine
have
too.
cream on cereal with brown sugar, you can't beat it. But that's one thing that was a little bit different for our family. And then we would go to Benson Bakery to get our bread because my dad didn't want us to have Wonder Bread, which we were just very sad because all of our friends had Wonder Bread. But we would get the fresh bread from Benson Bakery, and we would go to Olson's Market, and my mom would get the hot dogs in the natural casing, and we would grill them on the grill outside. And to this day, if I could have that hot dog, I would take it over any steak. It was so delicious. And then she would get the hot dog buns at the bakery, which were also so delicious.
Yeah, and I remember Olson's Meat Market, the smell walking in there of the fresh meat, and it had the little white octagon shaped tiles on the floor with black grouting. I remember that, and the sawdust on the floor. And I can remember that smell, and the Benson Bakery smell too. And you could walk in the back door of the bakery anytime and walk right through where they were baking and go to the front of the store to buy any. And I think donuts were 5 or 10 cents a piece.
And their crinkles, of course, were wonderful. But
Yeah.
my favorite was the glazed donuts. And then the bread, you would just choose your bread, and then they would slice it for you.
If it wasn't too hot and fresh,
Yeah.
they couldn't slice if it was hot.
Then later, when I got married in 1969, I shopped at the Safeway, which is where
Bank of the West is
Yes,
now.
Bank of the West. I had to think it's a bear.
Mhm.
I know that.
Yeah.
And so the Safeway was there, and I lived at 64th and Military, right by the Catholic Church there.
Well, there's a few more places where we'd go once in a while. Over at Grace Young Park, there used to be a little candy store called Gimpy's, and my husband remembers going there. It's right across from St. Bernard's, and the man that owned it was blind, and kids would steal from him. It was pretty sad, really, but my husband remembers that. And then there was Minky's grocery store. He said there was one 61st south of Ames, and then there was another one at about 62nd and Ames, and he thinks they merged at some point. It was a little grocery store, and I think it was open on Sundays because I believe the owners were Jewish. So they were open on Sunday, which was unusual because most everything was closed evenings and Sundays. And
including gas stations. You
Yeah.
had to plan ahead for gas.
yeah. And then there was another little candy store on about 52nd and Bedford, or maybe one block north of there, north of Monroe. And it was just somebody in their house. They had kind of an outdoor screen window that they would prop open when it was good weather, I suppose, mostly. And it had a little counter, and kids would stop there and get candy on their way to home from school. So that
And there was
another-
one, we just remembered this, at 66th and Maple, where
On the
Kaufman
s-
Appliance
used
was,
to be, that would be the southeast corner of 66th and Maple.
and it was a grocery store,
Mhm.
and we would stop on the way home and buy candy.
Mm-hmm.
So that has never changed. Kids love to buy candy after school.
Yeah.
So
And then
that hasn't changed.
just east of that little grocery store, there's a tan brick building on the south side of Maple there that was a World Herald substation. And so a lot of the boys that were paper boys would stop there and pick up their papers to deliver after school. And another thing about paper boys is they would have to go collecting from people. And they had a little card with a punch, and they would go to the house and collect money to pay for the newspaper every week. And people wouldn't have change, and so then they'd have to come back, and so you
It
can
was
see
a lot
why
of
they
work.
quit doing that. But that remained the same, and probably until about, I'd say probably pretty close to 1980 even.